So, today we're going to tackle a really big question. How do you actually put a price tag on the financial risks of climate change? I mean, this is a topic that's jumping right out of the science lab and landing squarely in the boardroom. And honestly, getting your head around it is going to be key to understanding the future of business. So, let's dive in. To really get where we're going, we have to take a quick look back. We all remember 2008, right? At its heart, that whole mess was about one thing: a massive failure to see and price risk correctly. All this information about mortgage assets was basically hidden, or nobody really understood it, and that led to a huge misallocation of capital and, well, a global meltdown. The TCFD report itself kicks off with this idea, and it really does set the stage perfectly. And that brings us to the absolute core question we're looking at today. What if we are making the exact same mistake right now? Not with some complex financial products, but with something way more fundamental: the stability of our planet and how it directly impacts every single company out there.
Yeah, this lack of good information is creating what you could call a new kind of financial storm. Without clear, consistent data on climate risk, investors are pretty much flying blind. They just can't see the turbulence up ahead.
Now, what's really fascinating here, and the TCFD report nails this, is why this risk is so misunderstood. A lot of people, they just see climate change as this distant, long-term thing. But the financial fallout, both the risks and, believe it or not, the opportunities, they're hitting companies right now. They are affecting decisions that are being made today. Okay, so to really wrap our heads around this, the experts break down climate-related financial risk into two main buckets. And it's absolutely crucial to get the difference because they hit businesses in totally different ways.
On one side, you've got what's called transition risk. This is all the financial risk that comes from our reaction to climate change. We're talking new government policies, game-changing technologies, and just big shifts in what customers want. Then, on the other side, you've got physical risk. And this is the direct punch from Mother Nature herself: the actual financial cost of stronger storms, rising seas, and brutal heat waves. So let's make transition risks real for a second. Imagine a government suddenly slaps on a strict carbon tax. A company with a whole fleet of gas-guzzling trucks, they might suddenly have to write off those assets completely, taking a huge financial hit. Or just think about tech. The rise of cheaper renewables could make a brand new fossil fuel power plant worthless way sooner than anyone planned. That is transition risk in action. Physical risks, though, they're much more direct. An acute event, like a massive flood, can just shut down a factory, completely wiping out revenues. Or a chronic shift, like a long-term drought in a farming region, could permanently jack up a company's cost for water. See, these aren't abstract, far-off problems. They're direct hits to the bottom line. So you've got all these complex risks, with trillions of dollars on the line. The financial world desperately needed a standardized way to talk about all this. And enter the hero of our story, the TCFD. Okay, the Task Force on Climate-Related Financial Disclosures, or TCFD for short, was set up by the very same group that keeps an eye on the health of the global financial system. And its mission was simple, but kind of revolutionary: create a common language. Develop a clear, consistent way for companies to tell their investors exactly how climate change might affect them, and importantly, what they're doing about it. And the real genius of the TCFD framework is just how simple it is. It doesn't bury companies in thousands of new rules. Instead, it just asks every organization to answer four really basic but fundamental questions. And in doing so, it creates this clear, undeniable link from the environment straight to the balance sheet. Now, this diagram here is great because it basically tells the entire story in one picture. Over on the left, you've got the risks and opportunities we've been talking about. In the middle, you see how those things have to filter through a company's actual strategy and how they manage risk. And then, this is the crucial part. On the right, you see how it all ends up having a direct, measurable financial impact. We're talking income statement, balance sheet, cash flow, the whole shebang. It's a clear chain of events. So these are the four pillars, the big questions every company needs to answer. First, governance. Who's in charge of this stuff? Is the board paying attention? Second, strategy. What are the actual risks you're facing, and how could they mess up your business? Third, risk management. Okay, so how do you find these risks and deal with them? And finally, metrics and targets. Just show us the numbers. What are you measuring, and what are your goals? So here's where the real rubber really meets the road: how this all shows up on the financial statements that investors actually read. That transition risk we talked about, like people suddenly deciding they don't want high carbon products anymore, boom, That hits your revenues right on the income statement. That physical risk, like sea level rise threatening your factory on the coast, well, that directly impacts the value of that asset right on your balance sheet. It makes the connection between planetary health and financial health completely undeniable. And the scale we're talking about here, it's just staggering. One study that the TCFD report points to estimated that the total value at risk to the world's managed assets from climate change could be as high as $43 trillion. Let that sink in for a second. 43 trillion. This isn't some niche fringe issue, it's a fundamental threat to the entire global economy. So, what does this all mean for the future? Well, the adoption of this TCFD framework, it really represents a huge shift in corporate transparency, and ultimately a shift in how our entire economy is going to work. Because look, when this kind of information is just out there in the open, markets can finally do what they're supposed to do, price risk correctly, and that leads to a much smarter, more efficient flow of capital. It rewards the companies that are actually building resilient businesses for the future, and it helps all of us have a smoother transition to a low-carbon economy. It helps us avoid that sudden, 2008-style shock to the system. And this kind of leaves us with one last big thought to chew on. As this kind of disclosure just becomes the normal way of doing business around the world, are we watching a permanent change in what we value? Are we stepping into a new era of finance, where a company's resilience, its ability to handle the challenges of this century, is every bit as important as its quarterly earnings report? It's a huge question, and it's one we're all going to be answering together.